In this video, we're going to talk about remote on-off and the proper way to connect remote on-off. Before we do that, let's just describe what remote on-off is. The remote on-off feature of a power supply enables the user or the system to send a signal that will either enable or disable the output of the power supply without disengaging the AC input. So you can continue to have the system energized, but the remote on-off feature will disable or enable the power supply as needed. In order to get started and to describe remote on-off, it's very important to go and reference the datasheet of the specific power supply, because the datasheet will let the user know, does the remote on-off enable the power supply with a signal or is it a contact closure? And there are differences in the different power supplies that are available, so it's important to be able to determine exactly how you're going to enable or disable the power supply. So one of the methods that is used is a signal method, where it'll either be a high or a low. And these are high-lows based on transistor logic, and that usually means that it's going to be a voltage level. So voltage levels below 2 volts to 0 would indicate a low, and voltage levels between 2.5 volts to 5 may indicate a high. The other option would be a contact closure, which would mean a short circuit across the remote on-off pins. Now here we have a power supply that is actually shipped in a way that it is enabled from start out of the box. And you'll notice that in this connector actually has a jumper between 2 points. This would indicate that in order to enable this power supply, we would have to short out those 2 points, which would indicate that this power supply will be activated with a low signal or an actual short circuit signal between the 2 points. Now, it's very common sometimes that as these power supplies get handled by different individuals as they're starting to test them, that connector might be missing. And if that connector is missing and the power supply is energized, the power supply will actually not be enabled and will actually be disabled and look like a failure. So it's very important to reference the datasheet first and determine whether or not that remote on-off signal is properly in the right spot for energizing the power supply. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to connect this. Just give me power. Okay, so if I pull this specific connector out at any given time, the output is going to be disconnected. So in an environment where this power supply is being handled, if that connection point isn't there for the remote on-off, the power supply will look like it's a failure, and it may have an erroneous return back to the manufacturer because of the remote on-off connection not being in the proper place where it would enable the power supply.